Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I am doing my recap for week 3 of the 2022 season of the Overwatch League. It was the first weekend where we got the APAC teams in action, so I'll try to focus on them a little bit more than the Western region teams. I'm going to try to go over a bunch of these matches pretty quickly because, like I said, it was a lot of games this weekend, so I don't want to spend too much time. I'll try to talk kind of about the things that I thought were the most interesting, the games that are the most interesting, and of course, talking about all of the many big stories from this past week. So let's jump in and let's show my picks from last week and how I did. You can see 2-0 on my big picks this week, recovering from a pretty bad week 1 and a 1-1 week 2. We went 2-0 this week in big picks. So yay for me. Huge dub there on my part. 15-3 overall, so a pretty strong week. Not too many surprises. Not surprisingly, most of those big surprises were in the APAC region. I went 2 of the 3 wrong were APAC games, so not super surprising there. So let's jump in with Friday. First game on Friday was the Shanghai Dragons against the Philadelphia Fusion, which went 3-0 in favor of the Philadelphia Fusion. One of the big surprises of the week for sure. I don't think many people expected that to go that way. I certainly did not expect it to go that way. Interesting weekend from the Shanghai Dragons. Obviously, they played 2 games. They went 1-1. But this game was the one I think was the bigger surprise. The Fusion start the season pretty well like they did last season, which is good to see from them. The Dragons looked questionable. Their best map was the third map, which is the one where Who Are You came in to play Genji. And I think a lot of people were kind of questioning that decision. I think it was probably the right move. I don't think Fleta's Genji is necessarily the best in the league. Is it bad? No, but I just definitely think Who Are You gives you some of that play-making Genji that you want out of your Genji player, which I don't necessarily think you get out of Fleta on the Genji. That was one of the problems they had back in 2020 when they lost the Summer Showdown. They didn't have a really great Genji play out of Fleta. So I thought it was a good move. I don't think he looked bad at all. I think it was just kind of a thing where it happens sometimes. And you sometimes have players that don't look as good. And so you sub them out. It's not that big a deal. I don't really think it was a poor decision to kind of put him in. I thought the Fusion played very, very well. I thought that their DPS looked incredible. I thought that M3 and Zest looked very, very good. And I think that this team looks very good on paper. And I think they really look better in game, even than I expected them. I had them at number 3, and I think they looked even better than I anticipated. We'll see what happens down the stretch. Obviously, last season they looked good at the beginning and then kind of fell off a bit at the end. So we'll see what happens with the Fusion, but I was pretty impressed with their performance in week 1, especially in their match against the Dragons, or week 3, I guess, but their first weekend. Next was the Guangzhou Charge beating the LA Valiant. It was a close series. I was actually pretty impressed with the Valiant throughout the entire weekend. I believe this was a 3-1. It was the most one-sided game the Valiant played all weekend. But generally speaking, I was actually quite impressed with the Valiant. I was actually more impressed with the Valiant this weekend than I was the Charge, which is funny because obviously Charge won this game. But I thought beyond this first match, the Charge did not look as exciting and as good, while the Valiant looked pretty good against some pretty decent opponents. And so it'll be interesting, in my opinion, to kind of see where this Valiant team goes from here. But I thought they looked pretty good this weekend. This was the best game from the Charge. They didn't look good really at all the rest of the weekend. So, yeah, that was kind of a stinker from the Charge for the rest of the weekend. But managing to get the win over the Valiant, I think, is impressive. But also, it was their first match of the season. They had a lot of time to prepare. So I think talent-wise, the Charge look good and probably better. But adaptability may not be as good. And we'll talk more about the Valiant as we go. So I don't want to talk about them too much. Final APAC match Friday was the Hangzhou Spark beating the Seoul Dynasty. Good win from the Spark. The Spark are a team I'm very up and down on. I think they have their moments where they look really good, and sometimes they look kind of questionable. But all in all, I think they look better than not. So shout out to what the Spark were able to do, getting a win over a Dynasty team that we feel pretty good about, and I feel pretty good about. So 2 of the 3 matches I got wrong already out of the way here. And it's going to be a while before we get to another one that I got wrong. But the Spark, I thought were pretty good. I didn't get to watch this game as closely as I would have liked to. But I was impressed by what I saw, especially from ATVI this weekend. I thought he looked really good. And we saw a lot of Bernard, a lot of Zarya play, which I thought the team looked good on as well. So big weekend, I think, for the Spark. Where I thought they silenced some of the doubts that people had about them. They didn't make a lot of changes. They didn't, make a ton of DPS line changes. It was pretty much Shy and Alfie the entire weekend, if not the entire weekend, just those two. And so their tank switching, they played Gushui sometimes, but largely they just played Bernard. So I was pretty impressed by what I saw from them. I think that the coaching decisions seem to have been wrangled in a bit, and I feel like they have kind of started to figure out what it is they really want to do. The North America matches on Friday all went pretty much as expected. Justice were able to beat the Eternal, Mayhem beat the Excelsior, Fuel beat the Defiant. They were all pretty one-sided. I think they were all 3-0s. Justice Series may have been a 3-1, but I think it was just 3-0, 3-0, 3-0. And that Mayhem Excelsior match to me was really a disappointing one. I think the New York Excelsior might be the worst team in the Western region behind the Vancouver Titans. Genuinely, I was not impressed by anything this NYXL team did, anything they've put together so far. Their win against Vancouver was not even like one that inspired confidence in me. So I don't think they're a good team. I think they might have the worst support line in the entire region. And they're just carried by a main tank that has a ton of talent and makes a lot of mistakes. And a DPS line of 2 players that are just really, really good. I really don't think this team is very good. I think they look bad. I think they have looked like one of the weakest teams. Their roster construction is poor, and I think that whoever was the one responsible for constructing it deserves a lot of blame for the fact that this roster just does not seem to have it together. Mayhem looked good, but XE came in on 200 ping and actually just clapped and destroyed a team that is at full strength, and he destroyed them. I think that Gangnam Jin and Myeonbong do not look like a duo that work well together because Gangnam Jin looks uncomfortable in what he's playing, and I just think it doesn't work. So, all in all, I was very disappointed with this NYXL team. They, to me, they are the team that I walked away from this weekend feeling the worst about. I think they look worse this weekend than they did last weekend, and they won last weekend, so it's not that surprising, but this was their opportunity to show they weren't a bottom-level team, and they just were terrible. So, the NYXL, to me, are the biggest losers this weekend because I did not think they looked very good. Whereas teams like the Eternal and the Defiant, I expected them to lose, and the Defiant I expected to lose not as badly as they did, but I was not surprised that they lost. I thought the Fuel played super well, so not much to take away from that. But the Justice win over the Eternal, like same thing, like we expected that. But I thought the NYXL just looked terrible this weekend and really disappointed me. So they are, in my opinion, the worst performing team of the weekend. And a lot of criticism on my end for this team. Saturday, I got every match pick right, so nothing too surprising. Chengdu Hunters beat the Guangzhou Charge, relatively one-sided series. Didn't really surprise me. I expected that series to go in favor of the Hunters. They had the time off. They had the ability to rest, and I think that kind of was something that was pretty evident. I don't think the Charge look very good. I think this is a meta that generally should favor the Hunters, so them losing was not a surprise to me. Dragons vs. Spark was a very close series. Went the distance 3-2, but ultimately it was the Hangzhou Spark that managed to pull it off. Very close one there. So good on the Spark, at least for keeping it close. Obviously, it was a tough week for the Shanghai Dragons with losing their first game, so you kind of expected and hoped they would bounce back in their second game. And they did, but it was very, very close, and they had to go the distance ultimately to take that one away. But they did manage to do it again. They did manage to take a win. Relatively back-and-forth series. Shanghai managed to take it away from the end, so good on them getting a nice win when they needed it the most. Seoul Dynasty were able to beat the LA Valiant, but this was a close 3-2 series, and this was really the game where my kind of Valiant stonks went up. I thought the Valiant looked very good this weekend. I think they lost a lot of matches in very close fashion. Obviously, they've already won more maps than the entire team did last season. I think Dia has been really good. One of my biggest concerns with this team was that they would do a lot of switching, so they would kind of switch their DPS players a lot because they have a lot of DPS players. But for the most part, they have played the same core two of Dia and Becky for most of the season. They put Azon in a few times, or Easyhan, I don't know exactly how you pronounce it. They put him in for a couple of maps here and there, but for the most part, it was really just Dia and Becky. And that, to me, was a very telling thing, of that they felt confident in who they have. Noel's coaching, he gave me the confidence I need. So despite the fact that the Valiant lost this series, I thought they played very well, and the Dynasty kind of needing a big win, this did not give me a ton of confidence in the team, but it was an improvement from their match the day before, and so that was kind of all you really wanted to see. Outlaws for Spitfire was a pretty one-sided series, a bit of a surprise to me. I was pretty high on the Spitfire recently, but ultimately the Outlaws the better team. I think the Outlaws have a direction. I think that their style works better than what the Spitfire like to run. I don't think the Outlaws are going to be a very consistently dominant team. I think that their playstyle is just too one-dimensional, and I think it's going to be easy for teams to kind of counter it. But when they play against competition that is less mechanically skilled and lower, and kind of we view them somewhat lower, I think they're going to be successful by and large throughout the majority of the season. So good win for the Outlaws. One they kind of need to help boost them back up in the standings. So good win for them. My first big pick game was the San Francisco Shock versus the LA Gladiators. And boy, oh boy, despite the fact that I picked the Shock, I really wanted this to be a game that went to the Gladiators. And now 2 weeks in a row, against good competition, the Gladiators have been reverse swept. That is a scary trend. Their schedule, they have to play Atlanta next week, which is tough. They could miss out on this tournament. I think they should make it. I think they have another relatively easy match to start off with. They play the Spitfire. And the Spitfire, the team that are kind of potentially the biggest threat to dethroning them. But I think a good showing against the Spitfire should help secure a spot in the tournament for the Gladiators. I think they're too good of a team to miss out on the tournament entirely, so I expect them to be there. But heartbreaking loss from them. The Shock made some questionable decisions the first half of that series, but by the second half, it was a very, very good look, and to see that the team has kind of put some of their stuff together and gotten one of those big wins. They have silenced the doubters that they've only played bad teams. San Francisco Shock are legit. They are arguably the best team in this Western region. It's between them and Dallas. We need to see them kind of face off with each other before we know for sure who number one is. But we know those two teams are the top two teams in the Western region right now. They both look incredible. They both look to be the juggernauts right now, the teams to beat. And so we'll see what happens as the season progresses. But the Shock put those doubters to bed, and we know they are a top team for sure. Final match on Saturday was the Boston Uprising versus the Toronto Defiant. Solid win for the Defiant, not one that makes you feel better or worse about the team. The Boston Uprising haven't looked super good, and the Defiant have looked relatively good all season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they play, in the tournament, which I think they will make. And it'll be interesting to kind of see where this team is, because I think they look good, not great. And I think that they have shown that they have some pieces that are talented and definitely have some potential. It'll just be interesting to see how that potential is realized as the season progresses. But overall, pretty happy with them. Boston's had a lot of issues this week, and we'll talk about them when we talk about the match with them between the Justice. We'll talk more about them then. But good showing, at least from the Defiant. Obviously, disappointing showing the day before, losing to Dallas, but beating Uprising in a pretty convincing fashion, I think, was a good look from them. Fusion beat the Charge on Sunday. Good win for them, 3-0 for them. 6-0 weekend for them, opening the season with a perfect map differential, much like the Shock did. So it'll be interesting to see if the Fusion can keep that up. Obviously, they beat the Dragons and they beat the Charge. Charge, not a team we're that high on, so them beating the Charge is not that big of a deal. Beating the Dragons is impressive and good to see, and especially in the fashion they did it. I definitely want to see them play Seoul. I want to see them play Chengdu. Those are the kind of two teams right now that I'm most interested in seeing them play, because those are the kind of next two best teams in this region, and Hangzhou as well. So They definitely have some tough matches ahead of them because they're going to play the entire region by the time all is said and done in this tournament cycle. So it'll be interesting to see if they look as good as they did this weekend as the season progresses, but definitely impressive showing from the Fusion this past weekend. Charge looked worse, I think, as the weekend progressed, which is not what you want to see. Despite the fact they beat the Valiant, I think I feel better about the Valiant right now than I do the Charge. Second big pick game was the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Chengdu Hunters. I expected this to be a relatively close game, and to be honest with you, it really wasn't. The Seoul Dynasty were pretty dominant with a 3-0 win over the Hunters, and I really think this speaks ultimately to just the flexibility the Dynasty have. I definitely think they have some issues with just having Smurf as a tank. I think having no off-tank might be a bit of an issue for this team going forward, more so than I thought it would be, because I thought Smurf was very good on pretty much everything, and he looks a little uncomfortable on some of the roles that he has been on. But generally speaking, I think the Dynasty looked very good over the Hunters. I think it shows the weaknesses of the Hunters, that the Hunters are not just like they have flaws. There are some things about this team that are just not amazing, and when they played against a good opponent like the Seoul Dynasty, those kind of things can get exposed. I didn't get to watch this match as closely as I would have liked to, so I don't have like exact notes on this roster. But as the season progresses, I want to see kind of how they match up with the rest of the APAC teams. Obviously, they have to play Shanghai this tournament cycle still. They have to play the Fusion. They have to play the Spark, and so I want to see them go up against those teams. The Valiant could very well beat them with the way they've been playing recently. That'll be interesting. And then the final APAC match for the weekend was the LA Valiant against the Hangzhou Spark. 3-2 win for the Spark, a very close series, which is once again why I feel confident about the Valiant. They're not the team I'm most impressed with from this weekend, though they're certainly one of them. Them and the Fusion are probably the two I'm most impressed with. But this Valiant team will get a win. I think they'll win next week. I don't know exactly against who, but I think they will get a win next week. Might be a surprising win, right? Like I said, Chengdu is a team I could see them beating, because I think in a double hit scan meta, you would feel much better about the Valiant. Maybe the Valiant beat Shanghai, which would be funny. Maybe they even beat the Fusion. Who knows? I think Chengdu is definitely their best shot at winning. It's the end of the week for them next week, so we'll have a better idea where these teams are at that point in time. But definitely impressed by the Valiant. They've pushed two of the teams they've played so far, and those are arguably the two best teams they've played in the Dynasty and the Spark. So I'm excited for this Valiant team going forward, which I didn't think I would be, but I think Dia has looked very good, and I think that Sashin with the Zarya meta has definitely been able to kind of flex some of his muscle. So overall, pretty happy with this Valiant performance. Spark looked good. Definitely some moments where I thought that it was going to be a win for the Valiant, but they did pull it out in the end. And so what happens as things go forward, we'll have to see, but definitely a team I have my eyes on and one that I'm excited for in the future. Western region, first two games on Sunday were not surprising. The Rain 3-0'd the Titans and the Fuel 3-0'd the Eternal. The two weaker teams we expected to lose got handled pretty poorly. Venom had his debut for the Rain and looked really good. Gator had his debut for the season and looked really good. So, unsurprisingly, Rain walked away from this one with the dub, and the Fuel won their match, which is good to see from them. Teams you expect to win, winning is always something, at least is a little nice when you have a region like the APAC region where we don't really know what's going on. But the final match on Sunday was the Boston Uprising getting a win over the Washington Justice. This is a big win for them. They've struggled so far this season to find success, this Uprising roster, and the Justice had looked like a pretty dominant team so far, but the Uprising walking away with a win is a pretty good sign for a roster that has been relatively weak. Obviously, there's these reports about Stryker being released from the team. We already have the news that Marvel got released from the team. We had that news earlier today. When the match was happening, it hadn't been announced, but it got announced before I recorded this video. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens as everything goes on. It'll be interesting to kind of see what this Uprising team is able to do, but I thought they actually looked decent against a Justice team we felt very good about. I literally went on Twitter on Friday talking about how Decay might be an MVP candidate, and then they lost. So we'll see what happens with this Uprising and Justice roster. I definitely still feel good about the Justice, but they're a team that I'm still waiting to see them be full to their potential. But it feels nice to see the Uprising get some wins when I was kind of high on the Uprising. And they're not dead in the water like people thought they would be. So definitely more excited for them than I am the Excelsior right now. So, as how things go. Just going to throw the standings up real quick. You can take a look at them. My standings may be a little different from the league standings right now, but that will, fix itself once we get towards the end. I prioritize certain things more than the league does, and I don't know exactly how the league's tiebreaker system works. When I try to follow it, it doesn't seem like they follow their own tiebreaker system, so we'll see what happens, but there you go. Those are your standings. The East region, Fusion there at the top, Valiant at the bottom, Shock topping the Western region with the Eternal right now sitting at the bottom by just 1 differential point. So that's going to be all for this one. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking and subscribing for more like it in the future. Comment down below your thoughts on this past weekend, biggest surprises, stuff like that. Love to hear from that in the comments down below. That's going to be all from me for today. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.